Hello, this is Taylor Ursula of That's So Pisces, and it's time to talk about our Aries full moon that isn't an eclipse. So let's explore. Now, the North Node is certainly hanging out in Aries and has been since mid-July. This full moon is taking place in Aries, and typically we would expect to see an eclipse happening. However, this North Node is still in the final degrees of Aries, making its way backward through the sign, while the full moon that we're experiencing is at 6 degrees and therefore still very early on in the sign of Aries. Therefore, they are not close enough to meet to create an eclipse. And we will have our full moon eclipse instead in Taurus, which will wrap up the story that opened up across 2022 while the North Node was traveling through Taurus. This full moon could be taking place late Thursday night on the 28th or early Friday morning, the 29th, depending on where you are. And basically, this full moon is the first conversation that the moon has once it enters into Aries. So there's nothing in Aries leading up to this full moon except for the sun. We go smack right into the full moon lunation. And from there, the moon begins to have conversations with other planets. In the midst of this full moon phase is when Venus wraps up their final square to Uranus. We had those play a big part of the Venus retrograde cycle, as well as in a series of lunations that were taking place at that time. So we had a third quarter moon in Taurus that was involving Venus squaring Uranus. We had the Leo new moon where the sun and the moon were engaged with Uranus. So there's been a lot of conversations about kind of what this has been bringing up for our attention. With this being the final square, similar to what we talked about with the first quarter moon in Sag last week, where Venus direct squared Jupiter retrograde after experiencing those squares with them both direct and then Venus retrograde and now Jupiter retrograde. We have a similar story happening here. Venus squared Uranus the first time while they were both direct. Venus squared Uranus the second time while Venus was retrograde. Venus will now be squaring Uranus the third time while Uranus is retrograde. Some of how this particular aspect showed up for us were a lot of surprises, a lot of maybe financial uncertainties, a lot of needing to maybe spend quickly or kind of cover our bases in some way. And so we might be seeing maybe a return on some of those expenditures. We might be seeing some clarity on what that was about and getting that final piece of information about kind of what we are able to do moving forward. We'll then have the moon oppose Mars, which Mars is ruling this moon. So that might bring up some frustrations. Maybe they are connected to the Venus square to Uranus. Perhaps there's something that feels out of our control or where we need the assistance or the advocacy of someone else to make something happen that we need. And that doesn't make us feel very good. Maybe it puts us in a tight place. From there, the moon will trine Venus, bringing in more of that information about that Venus-Uranus square. We'll then have the moon meet the North Node, showing us a little bit about what this is guiding us toward, but also making us feel a bit unstable. The moon rules the nodes just overall as a concept. And so when the moon meets those nodes, it might feel like, whoa, is this happening? Is this real? And lastly, the moon will square Pluto, which is hanging out in Capricorn, right? And so there is some maybe urge that we want to be free of some power that is currently controlling us or that otherwise is being kind of held over us in some way. There's an urge to break out of that arrangement. There is maybe a feeling of not being able to have our emotional needs met because there's something pervasive happening within us. All things that we should pay attention to at this time. And I'll mention that the next day is when Mercury, finishing up its retrograde shadow, comes in to trine Uranus a third time. So we'll see a little bit maybe about innovative ways we can outthink some of our problems, new ideas that propel us past some of the drama that is brought up by this moon. We'll see what kind of comes to us in that sense, in that time. Okay, let's go ahead and pull some cards. We'll recap what we pulled for the Virgo new moon and the Sagittarius first quarter moon, and we'll see what this Aries full moon is bringing up for us now. See you then.
Okay, here is a quick recap of the cards we've pulled in this lunation cycle thus far, starting with our Virgo new moon 2 weeks ago and last week's first quarter moon in Sagittarius. If you missed these, go ahead and check out those videos now. Meet us back here and we'll pull for this full moon. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. If you want to follow along and pull for yourself, you can head to the info in the description of this video and you'll find my website where you will find a free PDF that includes all of these lunation pulls. Okay, and just to recap, the questions that we're asking the cards today are about the situation that is culminating now, looking at how we can make space for this situation or this revelation, what we are able to celebrate in the light of this full moon, as well as what we are able to begin to release as the moon begins to wane. Okay, and we'll see how this ties into our broader lunation narrative. Okay. Okay, so a situation culminating now. Okay, the Ace of Cups. All right, so we had the Two of Cups in our Virgo new moon pull, right? That's where we ended. We were looking at how we could ground our ideas and intentions, and that was by connecting with people one-on-one about what we wanted to put into the world, what we wanted to be feeling, what we wanted to be expressing. We ended last week's first quarter moon pull with the Ace of Swords. We were talking about just kind of being open to these new ideas, these new intuitions that were coming to us, and whether or not we were going to be able to fully make space for that. And what we could do was kind of just move forward with it, like just hit the road, Jack, just like get that show on the road. And what we wanted to be able to work with, the lessons that were showing up for us, were in the Ace of Swords. So we have these very beginning energies that we've been looking at, and it's beautiful to see that we are able to recognize some new feelings, just being open to new emotional possibilities, right? I love aces. They are just full of potential. There's no directive on what we have to do with that. And if anything, we are kind of taking a step back from what we did in the Virgo new moon. We connected, right, with other people in the two. And so here we are, just open to new feelings. What a fresh thing to experience in an Aries full moon, right? I can just feel there's something potent rising to the surface that I'm able to like tap into. So, how we can make space for these new feelings. Okay, the Ace of Wands. Wow, okay. So much fresh energy at this full moon. Love that there's not an eclipse here, which means that we're able to act on these things. We're able to really act on the energy that is manifesting for us now. So, how we can make space for the situation is to create it, create the space. Tap into that passionate energy. Think about what these feelings are stirring up for you, what's being opened by the possibility of these feelings, and then get creative about what possibilities you can begin to act on or move toward, right? Similar to the Three of Wands we saw last week, where we just start. And something about this Ace of Wands, maybe it's not a new thing, a new passion, but maybe it finally has the opportunity to become fully manifest, right? So this doesn't have to be go get a new idea. Maybe you've had something on the back burner. Maybe you've been thinking about something, waiting for the right time, waiting for the iron to be hot so we can strike, right? And this is this moment. So recognize where the iron is hot enough to strike now on something that you maybe have been hanging on to or, waiting to utilize. Okay, what we can celebrate in the light of this full moon? Emotional mastery. Okay, beautiful. Beautiful. So we can celebrate that we have become so aligned with our feelings, with our emotions, that we are able to hold space for them no matter what. And we're able to do that for others. We are ready to hold space for other people's feelings at this time. Perhaps because of the strength card that we saw in that Virgo new moon, where we were really aligning our instincts. We saw the Chariot, where we were really aligning our drive and what we're being pulled toward. Those energies need to be working together, right, in order for us to really be conscious of what we're leading ourselves toward. And so here we've done this work of really getting to know our emotions, being able to crystallize ground within ourselves, anchor that, and be able to see through maybe what on the surface is difficult and create some sort of beam of light that pierces through those clouds. So let's absolutely celebrate that. That is a huge milestone. It's beautiful to be able to create and hold that space for ourselves and others. And probably what allows us to tap into what's been on the back burner now. We're emotionally mature enough and ready to hold space for whatever feelings arise as we initiate these things. And what we can release in the light of this moon or prepare to release. Any feelings about not being ourselves, any doubt we've had about where we're not showing up authentically, right? Which makes so much sense if we've tapped into these instinctual places, into these motivational places, into our drive, and we've gotten clear on who we want to connect with and what we want to be feeling, then that's us going back for that authentic self to bring them to the forefront, to the surface, so we can begin to release any qualms we're having about not being our authentic self. So perfect for an Aries full moon. Okay, beautiful. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, I would love it if you could give it a like, give it a share, and maybe subscribe. I would love to see you here next week to talk about this third quarter moon energy and to see how this whole lunation cycle comes to a close. All right, see you then.